Okay, if everyone's all set, thank you very much for coming this morning. Today is the last day to register to vote in Massachusetts for the November 6th election if you need to register to vote. Fortunately, we have already a great number of eligible voters. We have over 4.4 million eligible voters. We've had a run-up to this deadline already. Our online voter registration service so far this month has registered 73,000 people, in fact almost 4,000 so far today. So I think there's a real awareness of the importance of the upcoming election, and I think people want to make sure they're eligible to vote. Clearly, those who have moved, especially those who perhaps have moved in the beginning of September and have moved to a new community, may want to make sure they're eligible to participate in that community. While it's true they can return to their previous place of registration in Massachusetts, it would be best if they had a new registration at their new location. This is a general election. The ballot will be the same for everyone, so party enrollment does not matter. Everyone's going to get the same ballot. We certainly are looking at some of the indicators, not only the voter registration, but also the level of interest in our absentee balloting as indicative of a strong and healthy turnout in November. But nevertheless, we're anxious to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to register. Every local election office will remain open till 8 p.m. this evening to afford persons the opportunity to go in person and register. There are three methods by which people may register to vote today. One of them, as I've already mentioned, is online voter registration. If they have a relationship with the Registry of Motor Vehicles, that will be effective for them. If they want to register by mail, it has to be postmarked by today. We strongly suggest that if they're going to register by mail using one of the forms that we have in fact distributed as part of our Information to Voters booklet, that they have it hand-canceled, postmarked that is, at their local post office to make sure that it will be deemed eligible. And lastly, and perhaps most effectively, they can go to their local election office and register in person. This way they'd be assured of being registered. Should they have any question as to their status, they can go to our official website and view and determine whether they are in fact already registered to vote. Early voting will begin next Monday on the 22nd. It will be throughout Massachusetts. Communities have various hours. If individuals want to determine exactly what the hours are in their community, they again should go to our official website where they are posted. We've sought and have had the cooperation of many local officials to encourage them to have extended hours. In fact, most of them have agreed to have some hours on the weekend during the 10-day cycle, which would be the 27th and 28th. We're excited about that. Last year, early voting, well, in 2016, I should say, early voting represented a third of our turnout. Over 1 million persons voted early. We'd like to see that high percentage again. There has been already our distribution of information to voters booklets. The booklets contain the 3 ballot questions that will be appearing in a binding fashion before the electorate. We've also encouraged by distribution of our list of candidates information, people can view their ballot on our official website. They can determine whether in fact the names that they'll be appearing on the ballot will be ones they're familiar with and make their choices. They can also determine where exactly they will vote. Where do I vote is another feature of our official website. So those are all factors as we make the final approach to this midterm election that I think will help our citizens participate. 4 years ago, we did not have a particularly good turnout. In 2014, we had less than 2.2 million voters participate. We are optimistic that this year will be higher. We had a very good turnout in the primary, both in the Democratic primary and Republican primary, and so we're encouraged by that high percentage of turnout then that will continue to the general election. We're also aware, obviously, of the national interest in this election, and therefore people are aware, even though perhaps some of our contests in Massachusetts aren't quite as exciting as other parts of the country, nevertheless, I think people recognize the importance of elections and voting, and therefore I think we're certainly going to have the opportunity to once again participate in that. So far, absentee balloting has been strong, which is encouraging, and we hope that it will continue. We'll continue to monitor it as the weeks go by. Between that and the early voting opportunities, we certainly think there's no excuse for people who want to participate in this most important election. That's my general message for the day. If there are any specific questions or interest, I'll be happy to answer them.
What kind of hours are required for early voting, and do you have a sense of how many communities are offering weekend hours?
Well, it's 10 days are required, so it's days that are required. The requirements are the most minimal on the smallest communities. We have strongly encouraged communities to have extended hours. We have a grant program by which we're offering communities financial rewards to open on weekends, and so far we've had good participation. Unfortunately, we do have some recalcitrant communities who have declined to open on weekends, including some larger ones, which is disturbing, but I don't have the statutory authority to order them to open on weekends. We have used local civic groups, political groups, to encourage them to open on weekends, and many have cooperated on participating. Several of the large cities, Boston in particular, have very generous hours. Many of the other communities have. As I said, we had a tremendous turnout in 2016, recognizing it was a very exciting presidential election, but we also had excellent cooperation from local clerks, and we're hoping they build on that. Unfortunately, as I said, we have had some resistance, but so far I think it's encouraging, and I think most communities will see a good level of participation.
In regards to early voting, this is not necessarily a Massachusetts issue, but in other states, you've seen some concerns about early voting just because of some of the things that might have happened in 2016 with meddling or voting boxes found that were unopened. What kind of assurances can you give people in Massachusetts about early voting?
Well,
it goes into an envelope.
Well, you've just answered it. Yeah. It goes into an envelope. First of all, the ballot itself is cast on election day. So there is no tabulation of ballots that are cast early. They're cast on election day as if they were an absent ballot. We are very carefully monitoring who participates, so therefore they obviously will not be eligible to return on election day and vote again. As far as the record keeping, as you know, our voter registration system is not on the internet, and we've jealously guarded its security. Local officials can only deal with their own community. We are monitoring carefully what they do because we do have the ability through our central voter registry to do that. As you also probably know, and as I repeat all the time, all of the ballots, including early ballots, are paper ballots. So therefore the actual card, the voter will be seeing the card they put in the envelope at the early voting location. That ballot will be preserved and delivered to the polls on election day. Their name will be recited just as if they were there. So we have basically modified our usual standards, which are very protective of our voter security. We obviously are as concerned as everybody about what happened in 2016 in other jurisdictions. We were not hacked. We don't believe that presents a problem, but at the same time, we also don't think it means that we don't have anything to worry about. We've increased our security. We're making sure local election officials are aware of how to operate. We're monitoring closely what they do. I think we have their full cooperation. We've had numerous training sessions throughout Massachusetts, so I'm optimistic as we go forward.
How popular do you think early voting is going to be this year?
Well, I think the fact that people are familiar with it, that we had such a good result in 2016, makes it more appealing. We think that many people will see this as an opportunity to avoid lines. I think the other reality is that many people recognize that if they work outside of the community where they live, just returning in time, especially for the November election, when the chances are it's going to be after dark when they get back to their community, gives them an excellent opportunity to get it out of the way, particularly if they know their choices. One of the things that we've tried to do with the distribution of the information of voters booklet, as well as on our website, the official ballot for each community, to familiarize people what's before them. I will mention to you that a number of communities have local questions which will appear on the ballot. Some of them will be on the official ballot, but other communities, they will not be on the official ballot, and they certainly are going to create some additional pressure for participation. And if people do vote early, they will have the opportunity to vote on the local questions that are not on the ballot. So for instance, in the city of Newton, they have a very vigorous debate going on about marijuana dispensaries, recreational marijuana. The city of Attleboro has a vacancy on the city council. There are a number of overrides. So there's a lot of local issues building up the turnout interest as well. And they may well promote a stronger early voting in those particular communities.
Are there any indications this year that are going to show people being driven to the polls, given the political climate or the contentious appointment or any of those say.
Well, I think the indications are what has been along the case, which is since the 2016 presidential election, I think there's been an increasing awareness of the significance of each and every vote. You had, once again, an election where the popular vote was not reflected in the electoral vote, and that disparity always drives people. And obviously, the contentiousness of many of the Washington decisions certainly has contributed to the political climate. We've seen strong voter registration now since the beginning of the administration. We continue to see it this year. We continue to see our participation levels here in Massachusetts. As I mentioned earlier, in the primaries, and I have to admit, I was surprised by the level of turnout. We were concerned because of the date. We were concerned because so many parts of the state didn't appear to have local races. Yet we had a terrific turnout on both the Democratic and the Republican side. So I think it suggests that there's a high level of political interest. I think the awareness of the national issues and control of the Congress certainly are something people are very aware of. I think, and what we've seen so far in the absentee balloting and the level of voter registration suggests that people are politically attuned. So we hope that that's going to contribute to a good turnout here.
Has there ever been any consideration of making voting day a holiday?
Well, the legislature has bills before them all the time to do that. They haven't enacted any. Obviously, it's a national election day, so that's will be a Tuesday. Whether it would actually increase turnout, who knows? It could add. It could just make for a longer weekend. You never know. So, but we'll see. We don't have it this year. We have to work with what we got.
You mentioned voter registration drives. How was the participation, or how was the participation there?
Well, you're talking about by private groups?
Yes.
Well, we know of them. Our concern with groups, private groups, is, of course, that they don't turn in sometimes the forms. And that's a real problem, unfortunately, and it's really very unfair to the voters that register. Unfortunately, various groups, but while they are well-intentioned, if they fail to get the forms to the right communities or postmarked on time, voters will not be eligible. So it's a real concern of ours. So while we provide support for private groups and encouragement to encourage them to get people registered, we're concerned only that today being the last day, that all those forms that they may have solicited have to get turned in. If they're not, there's going to be a real problem. We've encouraged private groups also to use our online opportunity because that's instantaneous, and it gives us a much better situation to work with. We hope that all the private groups that have been registering voters will make sure that they get all the forms that they've solicited to the right local offices today. Not to us, but to each and every local office that they have.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Well, thank you very much. Again, early voting begins next Monday. The close of registration is today. 8 p.m. is the final deadline. Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you.